Welcome, everyone, to the 2024 Gaudy Boy Poetry Book Prize finalists reading. We're so glad that you're all here to join us. We're going to have a really wonderful event, I think, a real showcase of Anglophone poetry by Asian poets across the world. My name is G. Leong Ko. I am the publisher of Gaudy Boy, a New York City-based independent press that publishes extraordinary work by Asian writers across the world. We publish poetry, fiction, as well as creative nonfiction. Gaudy Boy is the publishing arm of a New York City-based literary nonprofit called Singapore Unbound. Besides publishing books through our press, Singapore Unbound also publishes an online literary journal called Suspect. And in addition to publications, Singapore Unbound also organizes events. And coming right up after this finalist reading, we have our 6th biennial Singapore Literature Festival in New York City that will take place next weekend. And the slides that you just saw are a preview of the very exciting events coming up for the festival. The first day of the festival will feature a keynote address by the wonderful theater artist Ong Keng Sen from Singapore, followed by the New York premiere of the film Ajuma. And the second day will feature exciting panel discussions on multilingual approaches to making art, film editing, and adapting classics for the stage. And the festival will end with a stage reading of a new opera, which is a modern reinterpretation of King Lear by an all-Asian, all-women cast. We're so delighted to have you here for the Gaudy Boy Poetry Book Prize finalist reading. And we are especially honored to have judged this year's competition, Ng Yi-sheng. Ng Yi-sheng is a Singaporean multidisciplinary writer, researcher, and activist. His poetry has won the Singapore Literature Prize. He is also the translator of the poetry of Wong Yun-wah and the editor of groundbreaking queer Singaporean anthologies. We're so pleased and honored to have him judge our prize this year. And throughout this event, he will be introducing our finalists, our readers, and also giving his comments, his responses to their work. So let's bring on Ng Yi-sheng to meet all of you.
Hi everyone. It's been an incredible honor to judge to be the judge for this year's Gaudy Boy Book Prize. I mean, I had and it was extremely flattered to be invited to judge. Like I'd actually considered sending in a manuscript myself before before later on discovering that I was going to be invited to judge. And throughout this, I've written short write-ups for each of for each of the 5 poets who are the finalists today. Hold on, Jidong, can I just double check? I say the little paragraphs I've written only before each writer, right? Not all of them at once, right?
Oh, it is fine. You can actually, introduce them with a couple of sentences about who they are, and then you can actually go ahead and give your citation for each person, as a kind of preamble to their reading.
Yeah. I prefer to do that. So and I'm kind of also aware that I may have read people pretty in my own very idiosyncratic ways, but what and honestly, that the quality of their pieces of entries was so excellent that I'm aware that another judge may have given may have chosen a different winner, but ah, I I'll just like to, I think I'll just begin by introducing our first reader, okay? Um, and our first reader is my fellow country person, Chrystal Ho, with A Way of Walking. Chrystal is a writer from Singapore who works with both poetry and nonfiction, and she's currently pursuing her master's in creative writing. This manuscript strikes very close to home to me, not just because Way of Walking comes from Singapore, but and because it takes inspiration from local histories and tropical biodiversity, which are two of my pet areas of research, and also of Wong Yunhua, the Chinese poet whom I've been translating. Chrystal's following in this ongoing movement of Singaporean eco-poetics, using the literary arts to critique our country's colonial and high-tech neo-colonial management of nature. And I found myself really drawn to her engagements with historical anecdote, contemporary art, the aesthetics of tourist traps, and personal memory to build intimacies with the living world around us, ever shifting in form and never settling upon a complacent relationship with her subject. Yeah, okay. Chrystal, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Ishang. Right, can everyone hear me okay? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Chrystal. Thank you for being here, and thank you to Gaudy Boy for organizing this competition and for putting together this reading. I'm so grateful and also honored to have this opportunity to share my writing today with you. And I'll just go straight into the reading. The first piece will be titled Mirror, Mirror. Spare me the fantasy of gondolas in Singapore, canals where the water is glassy and pristine. What I want to know is how the samba deer will learn to tread water, now twice evicted from its home by displaced silt and sand. Last night, I dreamt the sea had come up to the window of my fourth-story bedroom, frothing in the color of whitening toothpaste. The water, the same Prussian blue that stains the places that have been grazed over and over by cyanide. That's how I knew it was still a dream as I stared at my reproduction hook's eye, fearing the moment the wave on the wall would turn into a telltale mirror. Tell me, mirror, how long more before my mother's flowers will be uprooted for vegetables, lit by a mock sun in our shaded corner unit? How long more before we return, along with the sand and sweet deer and blasted pigeons, to the bottom of the sea from which we came? So that was Mirror, Mirror. While selecting poems for this reading, I kept thinking back to what I consider the original impulse of this project, and part of which was to think about how gardens as constructed spaces mediate human and nature encounters, for better and for worse. And over the next few poems, I'd like to walk you through some different gardens in Singapore. You may be familiar with how the city-state is also a self-styled city and a garden. And I'd like to start with a section of the Flower Dome, which is one of the conservatories in Gardens by the Bay. So this is the one of the super tree structures that you may have seen pictures of online. And this poem is titled Californian Garden. When the kale unfurled, its ruffled edges lost all of its curls. Still, it proliferated, becoming more powdered than green. Whatever is left of its bitterness remains a mystery. The same could be said of how a lemon could ever come to term beneath the second branch of such a dwarfing tree, except that if a blade were to race through its dimpled skin, then it would have caused one's lips to pucker, meaning it may as well have been yellow. Under the practiced cover of a tantrum, a child's hand reaches towards an immature grape. There is no longer anything tentative in the way the vines snake across the overhead trellises, forming some kind of porous shelter from the sunlight that diffuses into the observatory. Somehow or other, the fussing child is lulled to sleep. By the illuminated suspension of dust motes, a makeshift mobile in mid-air, by the air itself, cold enough to hypnotize even the most homesick of plants into birthing a beaded fruit, now nowhere to be seen. No one knows when or how it happened. In the day, under the nose of an unsuspecting visitor, the ever-watchful exit signs. When they eventually located the lost mandarin, bruised amongst the other fallen fruit, it was no longer possible to distinguish who was what or when, despite their varying stages of rot. What was peculiar was how there was no smell. The kale continues to stretch. Its veins, now taut as lifelines on a palm, have started to inch towards a petrified gray. And the legend of the blown rose that once crossed the observatory's dome to perch upon the grape trellises on the other side may simply be just that, mere story. But when the ribbons on their pods have faded orange, the mandarins will continue to fruit as trees do, wholly unmolested. Okay, the next poem is set in the Singapore Zoo, which I also consider a kind of garden, and it is at the Hamadryas baboon exhibit. Through the glass, a fingerprint-smothered world. A mother runs with her child around her neck. Each day, we move the same, swinging pendulums, ticking time, fingers combing through each other's hair. Tired of waiting for something to happen, a young one wanders past the edge of the glass to urinate. Elsewhere, the cosmos cracks into bloom. A child fiddles with a freshly splintered stick. Isn't it beautiful how the world lives and heaves? No one else hears the strangled screams, the word clutched senseless in a claiming fist. So that's at the Hamadryas baboon exhibit. In the next poem, I'd like to talk about a lost garden, and this is the garden where Agnes Joachim cultivated the national flower of Singapore in around 1890, and this is the orchid known as the Vanda Miss Joachim. So this garden no longer exists, and nothing remains of it except for some old street maps and fictionalized accounts, and even the address itself, which no longer exists. I found it in an oral history interview reel. So what I did was to kind of take these snippets and remnant accounts and write a portrait of the garden at number 2 Knocker Street. And the poem begins with an epigraph that goes, "A few years ago, Miss Joachim, a lady residing in Singapore, well known for her success as a horticulturist, succeeded in crossing Vanda Hookeriana, as categorized by Reichenbach, and Vanda Terrace. And as I cannot find any record of this cross having been made before, I describe it herewith." So this was written by Henry Ridley, the first director of the Singapore Botanic Gardens in 1893 in the Gardener's Chronicle. And here is number 2 Knocker Street. In this garden, there are flowers, pinks blending with whites in the way of watercolors, and frillier ones, clumps of freshly gathered lace ruffles, their edges generously stippled with weeping purple spots. It was here, after all, where the carpenter bees were said to have visited, flitting from flower to flower in their furry yellow jumpers, perhaps causing a seed pod to form, then fall into a bamboo copse which may or may not have existed, casting such a longing shadow over a particular section of the garden that a sun-loving species could not have bloomed. That is, unless specifically coaxed to counter their natural instincts by persistent human hands, and even then, there exist several alternative realities in which those hands had shook, scattering the pollen to the wind, in which the toothpick pierced the heart of a bloom instead of pollinating it, in which a seed pod never formed, despite the now practiced grace of hands still too large for the task, in which, for reasons unknown, the orchid simply never came to be. But just as how the grass in any garden would break through a concrete path or form a fractured lattice amidst a pathway of evenly spaced stones, those hands would have hovered as a mimosa patch watches for a wandering finger, counting every vein, every bud, every bloom. So that's number 2 Knocker Street. And now for the final poem. I thought we'll return to the home garden in Singapore, which is where the first poem, Mira Mira also began. And I just wanted to point out that the home garden for me all my life has looked like potted plants outside an apartment home. So this is on avocados epilogue. Some things may best be understood as delusions, like the prospect of avocados populating a thin stem, lacking the strength to support the weight of the pit from which it came. It remains a wonder how this pit could germinate, anchoring itself into a pot of hardened soil. Under a differently filtered sand, a man harvests the glossiest avocado leaves from his yard, then tosses them into his midday salad to add what I can only presume must be color, a flavor that remains to me unfathomable. Here, even the brownest leaves hold, as if it were not in their nature to fall, long after their stems have been bruised beyond repair by yet another night of unceasing rain. So we learn to count each leaf, the fallen and fresh ones, whether every leaf that shrivels will be accompanied by new growth, a need for more earth, perhaps a bigger pot. As for the fruit, we'll think about it when we get there. Just let me know when you think it's time. Right, so that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Uh, sorry. Thanks so much, Chrystal. That was lovely. Yeah. I'd now like to introduce our next reader, who is Mandy Mo Point Two, with her collection FABLEMAKER. Mandy Mo Point Two is a writer from Yangon, Myanmar, which I had the fortune to visit way back in 2013 when the country was just opening up. Yeah, she lives and teaches in Madison, Wisconsin. On 1st February 2021, the military powers of Myanmar launched a coup, seizing power from democratically elected leaders from the National League of Democracy. In response, citizens launched the Spring Revolution, a series of protests and acts of resistance that continues to this day. FABLEMAKER is written in the wake of this trauma, with knowledge of both the privilege and the burden of being absent from her home country of Myanmar in this era of violence and struggle. Mandy is weaving together personal family histories, the Burmese literary form of the Usana, the strange condition of being a foreigner in the United States, and repeatedly, the paradoxical motif of fable making as a means of both imaginative creation and testimony. It's deeply moving for me, at times aesthetically sublime and politically urgent as a voice drawing attention to the ongoing crisis. Mandy.
Thank you so much. That's very kind. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here with all the, Gaudy Boys, Singapore Unbound, and all the finalists. Thank you to everyone who's here. It is a joy to be, well, a joy and a privilege to be able to read from my full length called FABLEMAKER. Yes, so I think FABLEMAKER kind of grew out of this contending with the revolution in Burma, my father's untimely death from COVID, mid-revolution, mid-pandemic in July 2021. And so the very first iteration of this book was just me trying to grapple with myriads of grief. And I think FABLEMAKER expanded, so it's become more of a sort of family history, considerations of fable making, myth making. But for this reading, I've decided to keep it thematically tight. So there'll be a number of father poems, so just heads up. Okay, so I am going to start with the first poem, which is called Savage. Savage. Savage, my father moves a raindrop off kilter. By raindrop, I mean a universe, his and mine both, pillared by something other than blood, or only blood. But 16 years later, the weight of wafting air against my cheek, an almost shifted jawline, buttons on a stranger's floor. In my mind, I was no older than 3, but I was 10. See how the brain rewrites itself. See how I'm self-correcting. Today, I'm obsessed with prolepsis. From all the years I watched each raindrop curl back skyward only to splatter against our thin tin roof. All the days crushing pink pills into whiskey glasses. Petrichor, alcohol. The word sitting so closely on my tongue, I often mistake one for the other. So that's the first one. The second one is from a sort of string of poems that populate the collection. They all start with like, "Dear fellow FABLEMAKER." And this is a revision of a poem that I submitted in the manuscript, but I think it's better now. But anyway, here we go. The second one is called "Dear fellow FABLEMAKER." Dear fellow FABLEMAKER, my country is governed by a constitution, marked by green hands in the year 2008. Provisions on a state of emergency. Imagine then a wet market, whiskered catfish still shuddering in shallow water, metal buckets holding 3, 5 at a time. A young man sells sugarcane juice in plastic bags, plastic straws dipped for the slurping. In my country, it's so hot we send a celestial dog to consume the sun. My mother braids her hair during eclipses. Here, the president may, if necessary, declare a military administrative order. Their coats the greens of pea shoots. We fry them up, lured onto our plates with sesame oil. In a blackout, we slumber hungry. Radio static lullabies, snippets of hushed voices. In my country, the sky is brighter than the earth. The National Defense and Security Council shall exercise the sovereign power in the name of the president. In our defense, we forgot our names. Security is a locked door, a bolted gate, and a guard dog waiting. Sovereign, a plastic tiara that will not fit my head. Once I fell in love and my grandfather wrapped a rosary around my wrist. Whichever spirit possessed me no longer. Love, restrict or suspend as required. A face I called mother, a father I called dead. Suspend this, body enclosed within an hour of his death. Restrict or suspend as required one or more fundamental rights of the citizens. A train ride to Naypyidaw months after the city's renaming, the emptiest capital. We stood on the road and watched the fog descend blue on the plains. My father's glasses fogged up whiskey bottles. Restrict, suspend, breath. How wrought, how stoppered. This was a state of emergency, and these were the provisions. Dear fellow FABLEMAKER, the legitimate measures of any military body on behalf of the Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Services, while a declaration of emergency is in operation, shall be valid. No legal action shall be taken on such legitimate measures. In my country, girls with stars for names die like the rest of us. Bullets break like water. So, and I forgot to mention this in the beginning, that the italics in that poem draw from the 2008 constitution that was imposed upon Myanmar by the military. So that was a core piece of information that I clearly left out. But anyway, so this next poem is called "It's a Bad Year for the Ginkgos." If you know me, you know I'm obsessed with the ginkgo tree. I have tattoo of the ginkgos. So it's nice when they feature in my poetry because I'm thinking about them for just many, many minutes in the day. So it's a bad year for the ginkgos, but they live to try again. Each near yellow leaf settles on the ground with its kindred, green heart, gold brow. What can we ask of them that we can't ask of ourselves? In Myanmar, an elderly man curls fetal, dead by any estimation in a blue United Nations shirt. In a play, the devil wears a leopard print. I always want to fuck the men on stage, but they're never single. They hold my hands while they mouth, thank you. I save my goodbyes until the last minute. In this life, my father waits by a different door for my arrival. Come play the piano, he says. I want to hear you play. I never pick up when he calls. In an elevator, Elijah Bean pulls out the yellow aventurine I got him. He doesn't like his jagged edges splintering his pockets, but he carries it. It must help, he tells me. 2 nights ago, I downloaded ancient voicemails just to hear my father breathe. Half a chuckle in the midst of honking cars and rustling linen shirts. Facebook Messenger lists all the calls I ignored, suggests missed call, call back, missed call, call back, missed call, call back. It's true, I heard my father. In the winter, I watch the ginkgos bare their arms to the snow, press my palm to their bark, beg mercy, mercy, mercy. I will end with this poem. It's called Salvage. It's an echo to the first poem, Savage, which was, it's the meaning of my father's English name, which was Selwyn. So little play on words here. And I'm going to talk about a ring in this poem, and I'm actually wearing it. So this is how things are going right now. Yay. All right. Salvage. Say I don't lose the diamond from his mother's ring. Say I don't wait for the TikTok algorithm to tell me, here's a message from someone who has passed. Say the automated reader doesn't command, forgive yourself for my death, and say I don't immediately think of my father. Say I don't turn the house over looking for a speck of star. Say there's breath enough for both of us. Say he spits and there's the diamond I didn't lose, a pinprick, cold and lovely. Say the rain comes down and my name is a prayer sticking to his lips. Say I don't lose him to the thunder. Say I'm not overhauling moth-dusted bed frames for memories I swear I possess. Say I'm a better daughter. Look how tenderly I place a vase of water hyacinths by his propped-up head. Look how I forgive him for all the hurt purpling on my skin. Listen, I'm singing his favorite song. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mandy. I mean, there's there's a great joy for me hearing all these poems from across the Asian diaspora because there's so much that resonates for us across our cultures, like wet markets, etc. And so I'd next like to introduce our third poet, who's Shalini Rana, with her collection No One But the Sun. She's an Indian American poet and a translator from the USA, currently residing in the DC area. She holds an MFA in poetry from the University of Arkansas. How do we make sense of death? Shalini Rana's No One But the Sun is unique among these manuscripts for its specific focus on a moment in the poet's life, the terminal illness and passing of her younger brother Shiv. And the work's harrowing to read, both due to the weight of its mourning and its intimate detail of the rites of hospital visits and loaded family interactions. Though we're living in a time of genocide and atrocity, it reminds us that the death of a singular loved one can possess mythic levels of tragedy. Shalini.
Thank you so much. Those are lovely remarks to my work, and it helps me not have to explain as much. Thank you. I'm really grateful to be in this space through Gaudy Boy Press. Thank you for selecting me as a finalist, and just getting to read with other Asian poets is really special. I find that it's rare to come across these spaces where we get to read together. So thank you so much. I'm going to start off reading the first poem. Let's see, let me just get it up here. This first poem is called Spring Storm, to my sister. I run to rain like it's some godly call, throw my study books aside, dash out the garage door, let puddles pool in my flip-flops, watch sky water strike asphalt like falling stars. Soon, see a small pink shirt peeking out from the door. I ask first, make it sound fun. Wanna come dance with me? After an uh-huh, I scoop her bubbling laughter through sheets of May spray. She aims her mouth at the opened skies, drinks and drinks. Your name is rain. Can you find yourself in it? We whirl into this world of water until she is soft shriek and giggle, until I am no longer brain and heft. This was a memory that I had written about when my sister, who's 12 years younger than me, she was very young, and I was in high school, so there was a lot of heft and stress during that time. This next poem is Portraits in Past Modal. 1. A thick-boned boy with our data's cleft chin. You would have played high school football with the feather feet of a tennis player. By 20, you would have had countless girlfriends, or many young women staring at the back of your head during class. If you were with one of these women, you would wait and walk her home, or whatever she might need to feel safe in a moment, without me or mama having to tell you. 2, you would know my friends' brothers and be friends with them too, clicking consoles after school. But you would not know A, the boy who wailed for you in the red wine room. 3, to the delight of our parents, you would be the child that loves tech, majors in computer science, always learning from Data, but disagreeing with his choice of operating system. You would be IT support for Mama. 4, there would be an older woman you see at the grocery store, like Jay, the Cameroonian day nurse who fed you through a tube. You would carry her groceries to the car, and after cracking a dad joke, you would listen to her volcanic laughter, flash your squint-eyed smile. 5, a little too late, I would discover the warm embrace of a blank page, wielding it to carry verses about ex-lovers, failed houseplants, a bad trip, different tragedies, because you would still be around. 6, I would be softer because you would be the one taking shape under Data's rough edges. Still, I would gift you scars and scratches from our nights of wrestling over nothing. 7, Mama and I would have brought home a female dog instead, not needing to fill the void of you, not needing to remind our little sister that you existed briefly, the lifespan of a Newfoundland. Girl as Chameleon, for my mother. I think about your past lives, you armored and equipped like firewall, ready any minute for brother's server to go down. Or you, soft shell of yourself, after he shut down for good. On our phone call, another mama emerges. The one who cranked up Culture Club every day after school. I imagine you mouthing the words to Karma Chameleon, punching fist mic to lips, kicking your backpack off the bed. Marauder of old things, you stole Nanusa's shirts and rolled them up at the elbows, donned a men's all-weather coat salvaged from the basement, pair of leggings, jelly pumps, an old fedora, and topped your look off with purple eyeshadow and braided hair swept to one side. Your days of suffering lonely school lunches eclipsed, you gush, by pretending I was Boy George. I slip into my own costumed past as you chat and remember skinny jeans worn like a second skin, fingerless gloves, side bangs crashing the pimpled shore of my forehead, a string-thin eyebrow. I want to tell you how similar we are, but I don't know where to start. Maybe I see myself beginning in this early version of you. No, I want to tell you how pretending has saved me too. This next poem is called Your Average Bindi Wearer. Here's my highly requested poem about moons. Actually, I'm wondering about pimple bindis, like the one that's swelling in the center of my forehead, third-eyeing this page, or the ripe ones caught in a timely fashion, seconds before leaving for a party. I'll scratch it off tomorrow, I lie, soon watch the ooze of steady pus, beginnings of a blood-etched scar. Once, crescent moon cuts beaded themselves between brothers' eyebrows, half bindi shape. The usual nick he bestowed himself on accident, from razor nails and arms that swung from faulty hinges, tired nerves. With my nose hooked to his, I would scan his crescent cut up close while he smiled wide for no camera. In his vast head of sky, I would lose myself, resurface, find his eyes lit like the moon's, a boy lost in space. And this is my final poem. Samsara, after Cyan J. I flip over today's tarot and it tells me who we are forever is who we are now. This summer, the doors swell like rice and the tree behind the house bends into breaking. Datta snaps off the problem limb and our dog monitors his work, then pees on a stump. I recall just moments ago how the tree bowed down to earth, to Prithvi, the vast one, befitting name of my baby cousin, a boy blooming into 4 years like some meadow who waits for no one except the sun, who dances his eyes like Balakrishna, singing joy into our aging bones. And forever, meaning the lives we've already lived, shaping this one now. The pattern of seasons swelling the single bud to life or death. In a dream, my dead brother loses the body he barely had, and still he smiles. Still he smiles like a strong meadow boy. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Shalini. That was really lovely. And okay, before I introduce our next poet, Meher Manda, who I should mention has been really leading the chat in talking about how lovely the poems are. I'd like to thank everyone else who are turning up. I mean, it's I believe Saturday night for those of you in the northern hemisphere, for those of you in the western hemisphere, and Sunday morning for for those of us in Asia. And so the fact that we've got over 40 people just gathering here for poetry and not forced to because of COVID, that's pretty amazing to me. And so, again, yeah, I'd like to introduce Meher Manda, the author of Some of Many Women, who is originally from Mumbai, India, and now residing in the United States. Now, there's something sacred about female rage. The academic in me sometimes wants to historicize it, categorizing it within the limited context of Western second wave feminism. And then I read a work like this, and I'm reminded of the persistent relevance of this fury and the license it gives for new generations of poets to speak their truths. Some of Many Women details the struggle of being an Indian woman, just exploring the tensions between pride and abjection, drawing from the goddesses and heroines of ancient epics to the 21st century activists and victims of acid attacks, visceral in its description of the body, daring in its experiments with form and heteroglossia in Telugu and Hindi, and always deliciously intense. Meher.
Hi. Thank you so much, Yisheng. That was so kind. Really feel seen by the rage. Thank you all so much for being here. I always say that Some of Many Women is the closest I will come to writing a memoir, so it just happens to be in poetic form. So I'm gonna get started right away. My first poem that I'm gonna read for you is Sisters on Gravel. In all the games we played secret roles you wouldn't want to be caught dead in. Dangerous, swashbuckling butter knife flingers with our mothers in the kitchen, we took mythical, old-timey folk tales, twisted them in over our heads. We swung genders, played heroes, tucked our skirts between our legs, we disrobed, took showers together, and cut through water with leaps and punts like wushu champions, landing clumsily on naked butts with our mothers in the kitchen. We mixed soap and glycerin and blew rainbow bubbles down to wishing wells, watched them fly deep down below, slinging rocks to measure the danger, daring and rescuing the sine qua non of our existence. Our mothers in the kitchen, we touched gently our plucky teats, compared notes by squeezing tightly between our fingertips each body. We learned to hold by holding the other. We discovered textures, patterns, curves, and edges by walking over our bodies, noting down the twists and turns. Our mothers in the kitchen, we took kitchen playwear, filled model vessels with dirt, we collected rocks, prop shellings, plant offals, cooked meals for devils. We refused to play woman, wrote stories with snakes in them. The snakes were our friends. Our mothers in the kitchen deep-fried corn balls to tame our energies, imagined us as mothers in training while we yanked heads off doll necks. We gave puppets crazy eyes, laughing witches-like. We cleaved down plants from strange trees, rubbed their chunks on our shins for magic. We played rough, we kissed roughly. We had to unlearn our kisses to kiss others because we kissed each other ferociously. By choking pores, we sucked the planet's air between our mouth and poured it into each other. Our mothers in the kitchen, we loved with our bodies, our lips. We distilled our love in secret homes far into neglected backyards. My sister and I grew to be unwomanlike together, to be everything our mothers in the kitchen were not. So when my sister dropped my hand, she taught me my first lesson of betrayal. When she sieved my name through love notes for a man, our mothers stepped out of the kitchen to let me know. To be wild is to be temporary. Thank you. The next poem that I'm going to read, a lot of this work obviously traces the relationship of the complicated relationship I share with my mother and the sort of the tug and the push and pull of it. So this is Kneeling. In the middle of a fight, I fall to my knees and straighten the wild seams of my mother's sari in genuflection, my argument whimpering into a compromise. How blindly one knee follows the other, how staunchly they pierce the ground, how quietly my toes curl up in memory. Yes, I have knelt and divulged my chest to the sky with supplication in front of a Lord before the doubting and suspicion, and then naturally for a boy, before the world clarified his secrets, and for every animal that has run to me ignorant of my sin. I have made obeisance to the dying plant, my thirst lodged in the back of my throat, and I have curtsied to hate, my body cinched into a bite, vulnerable and open. No stock has been paid to the jabs from the earth, to the soil and its fear, its rubble crushing under the impact of my performance. Snow, gravel, weed, and cement has been dented from my falling. Little flowers have met with precocious deaths under my weight, and life went on like nothing spectacular ever happened. Lately, however, all acts feel futile. I do not know if there is love that can weaken my knees anymore. The gods, too, have hung their heads in shame, and their devotees have conjured a schema more irreproachable than ordinary. This world, its entrapment, the scorn that sits crisscross applesauce in the hearts of most men, has stiffened my kneecaps. Watching my mother kneel to pray has become an exercise of embarrassment. Her gangly hands cushioning her knees, a show of how far we've arrived in beseechment. I have seen what kneeling has done to men and women, and recently I have observed that no one is able to become one with earth without a solid cry. Maybe the older I grow, the more I'm aware of how close I am to the ground, my shadow on earth, an ominous premonition. Yesterday, I watched a cat crawl into the mud and emerge soon after and wept the song of jealousy. No such luck waits for me and the rest of mine. When I go down on my knees, I hang on to the seams of my mother's sari, try to remain a daughter still in the eyes of whatever fate is keen to befall all of us. Thank you. The beginnings of this collection began with a challenge by a professor of mine who asked me to write poems or write any work addressing existing narrative figures. And even as a radical atheist, I feel really drawn to the women of our mythology that raised me. And so these are a set of prose poems called Futile Gods. They all have an epigraph to contextualize their role in our faith. The first one is Kali. The epigraph reads, "She welcomes me blue-colored, tongue-smeared blood, four-handed, holding trident, conch shell, cutting disc, club, ready to strike, her foot clobbering the chest of a Rakshasa, our very own angry goddess. Dear sister of mine, simmer down for a minute, shrug off that tension, that unbending rage, and let's talk angry woman to angry woman. Breathe easy, listen. Despite my misgivings, my utter lack of faith in scriptures, hailing you God, destroyer of ego, checker of evil, slayer of deceivers, my body aches to channel your superhuman wrath. My form stretches into stances of fury, my tongue boldly spits smack without fear, without penalty, but you tire me so. How can you stand to see yourself made into a feminist icon, rising from gospeled misogyny as sword bearer? Did you choose to be tasked with misleading me this way? Did you ask to be painted on, ask for blood on tongue, ask to be named the Black One, indigenous menfolk to kill, a crusader on quest to consolidate justice? Do you know? Your irate self on walls notwithstanding, they always fan my madness. To sleep, to hypnotic dormancy, with fancy chatter of systems and institutions, of respect, due processes, they hail your violence and cool mine. Because they defer to you and cast me out is why you are God and I, a hunkered down image of woman. The next one is Draupadi. And the epigraph is from Kesari Mohan Ganguly's translation of the Mahabharata. And Kunti, who was there within the room and saw not her sons, replied, saying, "Enjoy ye all what ye have obtained." Dear sister of mine, when you took on unwillingly to reap a mother's words, 5 husbands, not lovers, 5 who could dare not cross, mother, another woman, whose words tore down your body to pulp, food that must be shared between loving brothers, your body portioned into 5 men who were not your lovers, your husbands. Did you spend a night tinkled by the prospect of so much love, an ocean of torrents, bodies with arms swimming through the cerulean, propelling the waters for their part of you? So why then have these stories thrust upon you immaculate honor, have taken their share of your body as offering for young girls? How can these tales think that a woman like you would not drown in love, that 5 men and 5 days of the week can not tire you? For 2 resting nights, tell me that you have acted upon this choice, have set kin against kin for your pick of the evenings. Tell me that you took your portioned body and chose the man who would drink it whole each night of each week. Thank you. The third and the final prose poem under the series is Sita, which has this translation from Valmiki's Ramayana. I will enter a fire to obtain the only course appropriate for me, who has been abandoned amidst an assembly of men by my husband who was not satisfied with my traits. Dear sister of mine, does it ever strike you to come upon the people who have you made a motive of chaste virtue, to see them, know of their songs for you, sung in celebrated abstinence, to read their poetry of your being in belonging to the man who had you in his power deported, with uncertain future, your fate excluded from his, a worthless refugee to his whim? Do you feel emboldened then, when your names are uttered in unison, your figurines hailed for the kind of love possible only between 2 strangers, impossible, to strip your character of his, to mutter your temptations, to outline the paths you could have chosen willfully, if not under the burden of impunity? Do you think you owe an explanation to phantom women you left in your wake, to give them the opportunity to stray toward pleasure, even if it comes with a death blow, even if it is ephemeral? Dear sister, if you knew what was to come in your departure, would you have taken a moment to set the record straight? Thank you. I'm going to read my final poem, which is actually a 2-part poem. It's supposed to be read, the first part is on the left and the second part is on the right. It's supposed to be facing one another, but in this case, I'm going to read the left-hand side first, which is Birth Saves You from One War. It operates as a contrapuntal, so in reading, you can read both columns separately, but they're also, part of one whole piece. The first time I escaped my mother would not be the last time. I came and time cracked a wound open. I coughed up life, and somewhere truant men with sticks and bricks struck down a home of prayer, and somewhere my father played witness to a burning city. I cried into life, and back home a child found flooding the country in tears looking for her mother. Now I know the story. Brutality repeats itself. A country born to life on hunched backs must kill to survive. For every nook of breath, a baton must smash into the hearts of the unsuspecting. If you must know something about this country, let it be this. Too many women have died to give its story meaning. Bundled live women and dead once women have all been maimed in similar ways, sacrificed, called mother. And the second part of this poem that's on the right-hand side is and unveils you to another. So it's birth saves you from one war and unveils you to another, which should be on the right-hand side of the page. Inside barricaded army lines, the soldier spits blood on snow. Inside a bricked, walled college campus, the student spits blood on dust. The Messiah has conducted a show of deathly horror whose balls live on in our folk music. Even the wordless song spells a story of undocumented history. Every hacked name is a life released into the wild. I claim every death for the sky's constellation. Brimful of stars disappear in the light, coughed fitfully with polluted love. Here, shine too is a clarity. We stay bright by sweeping the kin of our kin, the blood of our blood under darkness. Every broken mosque is a living temple. Every prayer a muted breath on a bloodied mouth. Every time my body was touched gently, held and cradled in affection, remember whole women who have been left asunder. So we burn our departed, collect logs of wood to perish in memory. We let the dead rise into the air, let their smoke congest our chests, pay the price to be alive. When the Messiah says stop, I hesitate. When the Messiah says dance, I shuffle on sharpened rocks. When the Messiah says die, I look at who he says it to. Gently release the relief of waiting. I still have words to speak, whole songs to sing. So I sing these words. Know that every color floats on colorless abyss until it is time to sink. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks, Meher. Yeah, apologies there about the not getting the text up in time. Yeah. Also, yeah, shout out from my boyfriend who's also a Hindu atheist. And yeah, I'd next like to introduce our next reader, Jan Dennis Distajo, with his collection Within Earshot. Jan Dennis Distajo is from Dayat, Camarines Norte in the Philippines, and he works as an architect in Quezon City, which I've had the fortune to visit quite a number of times. Now, when I first encountered Filipino poetry in English in the 90s and 2000s, I found that its dominant mode was one of excess and passion, and Distajo's Within Earshot represents the massive transformations of the scene since then because this manuscript is characterized by its restraint, its fair language, its invocations of the everyday, and its avoidance of mythic reference and identity politics. Yet it's still heavy with the depths of sadness and reflections on living in a nation which, like pretty much all our nations today, has yet to fulfill the promises of its democracy. Okay. Dennis?
Hi. Uh, is the volume okay? Okay. Thank you so much for that intro about my work. Actually, pretty nervous. So the first one I'll be reading is a short one. I think this is the one that started most of what I perceive as my life with poetry. It's called Horizontal. Gaudy found the path to heaven and presumably to God on the geometry of his magnum opus sprouting towards the sky. But he left it early, unfulfilled, with his body against the road. The same position when Michelangelo drew another way. The complete narrative in a damp concrete ceiling. I presume over departing strength and vision, a resemblance, clearing when I found God on the way inside an ambulance asking for contact details. I actually forgot that I wrote something about my manuscript. So if you just let me read before I went to the next poem, it's connected. So compiling this manuscript is like to accept, but really meant that I was done writing the sequence. The sequence meaning what began this life with poetry. I want to think that this work in 4 parts illustrates my growth as a fan of poetry, not only as a medium, but also as a vocation. It seemed for the longest time that poetry is at the crux of what I do in my life, my profession, the media I enjoy, when I read fiction, when I watch YouTube videos, wherever I look, I see poetry. And I think this is what the manuscript points to. With the title "Within Earshot" was taken from the poem "Theory of Defensible Space," which is the one I'm reading next, which I correlate with how I see poetry, which is the visible filter between loneliness of the form to the reader, but also allows noise to come in and out and serve as like a protective bubble, like how a community also protects a home. I think that this tension is where I want some of these poems to exist, to find new ways to say something. And in those failures, when they eventually fail, you leave something open. Everyone can hear one another, everyone can listen, and in the end, hopefully understand one another. So I think that's also what this poem is about. The Theory of Defensible Space. It has an epigraph by Alan Grossman from his poem. In the Cadman room, shelves groan under the weight of eloquent blank pages, histories of a sweet world in which we are not found. The house did not have a name, as if it was left on its own, in a defined path with no significant turns, exposed, paved and with enough in-betweens for seepage, for grass to grow like hair on newborns, for land to exhale what the rain left on the surface. Bare plaster finish, windows encaged by grills as if imposing this is as far as I could tell the story. Hearsay stayed within these eroded lines, speculation staked to the broken pieces atop the parapet. But mumbling still bounced outside and over the trees and gurgled carefully through the overgrown softscape of the yard. There's an occasional alien tune from the hanging linens that signal what is for lullaby and ode. The structure surprisingly servile, as in compliance rather than geodesy. Right within the minimum setbacks for the upcoming road widening, for visual stimuli and your consideration. Just by the roof's patina, the wall's efflorescence, by the time my ancestors leave and close the door, I could lock it too and move in for life, if not for, well, life and the bitter logic. And besides, within earshot, there's a broken muffler of a service tricycle, the fruit vendor, the local gossip, more people walking, and trucks loading gravel on the hardware store across the street. A community and a house that is going to be more hollow than the blocks it was built with. Who would dare attempt to trespass and steal? Okay, the next one is a duplex, which is also a form that I discovered by Jericho Brown. So, duplex. Architecture is meant to control not what you see, but what you feel. When you see a path, what do you feel? Do you tend to resist and make another? I tend to resist and make another one of the decisions I thought was mine. So I decide these thoughts are mine to control by the weight of my hand. By controlling the line weight with my hand, you will know what's in front of you. But the front is, what's in it for you trying to make this a gesture of hope? What's left to try is to make this gesture hope and an architecture that's meant to control. Thank you. The last one I'll be reading is also the last poem of the entire manuscript. It's called Circle the Drain. So this is about age back when my hair was so long, hair falling off. I am certain water is not the issue. But ancient Rome never saw it coming, all brought by the greatest innovation. Well, technically, it was the lead in the taps, not the aqueducts themselves, nor the pipes, that gave an empire its slow death. What else would you worry about with water so clear, clean, and cold, if not to keep it inside the body? James Tate should have been a lot suspicious of our system, not his plumber. Like all kinds of fitting, T's, elbows, Y's, why couplings are named by sex. The thing about plumbing is angle and siphonage. What comes out should almost always go down. Every day, I lather and rinse with my fingers, watch one strand after another fall from my head, circling the drain to the cesspool of sludge and eternity. I know my way with temperature, what should be for cleaning and drinking. What I have little confidence with is time. The kind we refuse to see until it clogs and haunts us more than our aging does. We move on from replacing earthenware with metal, corroding the poison, then plastic to plastic, polybutylene to unplasticiles, polyvinyl chloride, sturdy to everlasting. I suspect the trap underneath the bathroom floor is leaking, with only hair loss as the safeguard, like a thick wrought iron gate in an old city. And the smell, an army of 1,000 men lying ready to sack everything into a new era. Thank you very much. That's all the poems.
Thanks so much, Dennis. And I realized, like, before introducing Dennis, I should have mentioned that Dennis is the last of our 5 readers tonight. Today, and also the last of our 5 finalists. So thank you to all of you, to Chrystal, Mandy, Meher, Shalini, and Dennis. And I think the time's come to reveal the winner, which is kind of sad because it feels like we've built this nice little community within the chat group already, and yeah, and it's kind of crazy to just say like, okay, now everyone only look at one of you, but still, let's keep this moment alive. Okay. Yeah, so the winning work of the Gaudy Boy Poetry Prize 2024 was a collection that, well, basically ticked every box for me, that fired on all cylinders. It's got a voice that's intimate yet eloquent, a style that's daring, embarking on playful experiments with form, but also musical and sensitive to rhythms, both fine and vast, returning again and again to the same obstinate motifs. It speaks from familiar perspectives, like that of the foreign student, a daughter wearing the weight of her familial traumas, while at the same time illuminating the epic and turbulent history of her country and our common post colonial legacy. And although it's filled with the grief of our ruinous time, it still affirms the necessity of artistic creation that we share as writers, of fable making. The 2024 winner is FABLEMAKER by Mandy Pwint. Okay. Thanks, Mandy. Yeah, and yeah, wait, sorry. You want to say some words first, or should we, get Mandy to do, a speech?
Oh no, not a speech. But wow, thank you. This is a high honor just to kind of, oof, okay, I don't have many words, but mostly thank you. Thank you for letting me be in the space. Thank you to all of the other finalists too. It was such a joy to hear your work, to be in community with you, to be writing with you. Yeah, thanks to Gaudy Boy and Jiliang Ko and Yishang and everyone. Yay. Okay, I'm gonna mute now.
Congratulations, Mandy, for winning the 2024 Gaudy Boy Poetry Book Prize. We really, really look forward to working closely with you to put out a book in April next year that all of us can be very proud of. And thank you, Yisheng, for judging this year's Gaudy Boy Poetry Book Prize. You came in, almost at the very last moment, so graciously read the manuscript with such insight and care, and then provided such illuminating comments on each one of them, highlighting their virtues and strengths. And I'm very, very sure that these manuscripts will go on to find publishing homes of their own. I want to also give a big thanks, big shout out to our finalist readers. I think this event has been a wonderful display of the strength, depth, and variety of Anglophone poetry written by Asians across the world. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to your readings. As Lily Philpott, our program director, said before this event started, this event is not just a competition, but also a community. We hope that you will continue to look out for each other's work, that everyone who is attending this event will look out for contemporary Asian poets to read and engage with. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We will say goodbye for now.